This is Israel at War. I'm Steve Conover. Today we welcome back our Executive Director, Jim Showers. Jim recently returned from Israel, where he and others were able to see the effects of the war. Thank you so much for being here, Jim.
It's my pleasure, Steve.
Jim, we're recording this in the third week of January, and you are just back from Israel. What brought you there in a time of war?
Well, it's a really good question because who goes to a country that's at war? But Israel's different. As you know, Steve, we began receiving money for Israel relief in 2012. So for 12 years now, we've been collecting funds. That money goes to help Israel with humanitarian needs. And Israel's overwhelmed with humanitarian needs now. And so when the war began, the attack on October 7th and the war that followed, we started receiving a lot of money to help. And we've been sending a lot of money. We've been sending basically that money over to help. But we felt like it was time to go and see how the money's being used. As part of our stewardship is to follow up. But I really felt like it would be a great opportunity to take along those who have been committed to giving to Israel relief. Because unless you go and see it, you can't begin to appreciate the impact it has and the kind of organizations we're working with. And so we reached out to and invited a handful of our donors to come with us, supporters of the ministry. And I was really pleased that they were willing to come, even though, you know, it isn't as safe as normally in Israel. And yet, I have to tell you, the whole time we were there, we never felt threatened. It felt very safe in Israel, even though there's a war going on in Gaza and trouble up on the northern border. But Steve, if there was a way to take everybody who watches this video with me, I'd love to take everybody there because the impact of this trip was so amazing, and I expected it would be that way. But everybody who went was just blown away. They just had no idea the work we're doing in Israel and how it's blessing the Jewish people, because the basis for the Israel Relief Fund, the basis for going, is God's command in Genesis 12:3. It's really a promise to Abram, but to us, it feels like a command. I'll bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you. And, you know, oftentimes people wonder, like, well, so what does that blessing mean? Like, how do you define blessing? What does it take to bless the Jewish people? Well, first of all, that word in Genesis 12:3 is a very active word. It means you have to get involved. You have to do something physical to bless. You can't just simply verbally try to encourage, but you need to get involved. And when we think in terms of what does blessing look like, you could draw from a number of places, but I think probably as good a place as any is Matthew 25, when Jesus told his disciples, one day I will return to judge the nations for how they have treated the Jewish people. And he lists 6 things there in how he's going to judge them. When I was hungry, you fed me. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. When I was a stranger, you took me in. When I was unclothed, you clothed me. When I was sick, you came and helped me. And when I was in prison, you came and encouraged me, right? Those 6 things guide what we do with the Israel Relief Fund and the organizations we work with. That we have a process of vetting them to make sure they're legitimate and checking their financial records and interviewing them and all that. But so we put this trip together. We'd never done anything like this. We've gone over ourselves and visited the organizations, and we know what an amazing trip that is, but we've never taken along others. And so that was the impetus to doing this. And because we wanted to be an encouragement to let the Jewish people know they're not alone. There are Christians the world over who are praying for them and giving financially to help them. That's a huge encouragement to Israel. So we put this together and said, let's see how it'll go. And people signed up, and it was a small group. We didn't want a large group. It was 14 people, and that was just the right size.
I know you met with organizations that we've worked with over the years, but you also met with some of our Friends of Israel workers while we were there.
Yes, we did. We were both in Rehovot in Jerusalem. We met with some of our workers there. heard what they're doing in their congregations to help soldiers and to help families of soldiers. So when Israel calls up the reserves, it takes husbands and sometimes wives away from families. And yet life goes on. And suddenly, the wife can be caring for several children without her husband there to support her. And so these ministries are doing amazing things, not only providing necessary equipment and supplies for soldiers like winter uniforms and things as simple as socks, but they're also helping the families. For example, if a family's in need of paying a bill, they pay it for them. Or if sometimes they cook meals and take them so mom doesn't have to fix dinner that night, or go to the grocery store and get whatever they need and take it to their door just to help out. It's one of the ways they can encourage. And so we witnessed that as well.
There's so many experiences that you shared when you first came back. And I'm curious, having been there with you just several weeks before this, what was your experience like going back now compared to when we were there in August, just before the war?
It felt like night and day, Steve. When you and I were there in early August, we just, everywhere we turned, we could feel the division in the country. And there were those protesting who said they would never serve in the IDF again if there was a war. In the magnitude and degree of October 7th, the attack by Hamas, put an end to all of that. Suddenly it wasn't, I don't agree with you politically. It was, we're brothers and this is us versus them, and we have to respond to protect the nation. One of the comments that really caught my attention when we were there, one of the organizations we visited said, October 7th put an end to the cry, never again. Never again was a statement. Often you would hear it in Israel and sometimes here in the U.S. that we would never allow Israel to be attacked again like they were for the Holocaust. But it happened. Not on the scale of the Holocaust, but the biggest attack against Jewish people since the Holocaust. And now Israel realizes that this neighborhood they live in, which is dangerous, can have lethal implications. It's one thing when you hear about an attack and a couple of Jewish people die in a car ramming or knifing or something like that, but the magnitude, the number 1,200 plus people died that day in those villages around Gaza. Those are staggering numbers. And not just that they died. It'd be one thing if they died, but also the way they were tortured, mutilated. It just was the worst experience you could imagine.
And it was a calculated attack. I'm surprised by the number of active Hamas agents involved in actually crossing the border and how much information they seem to have. You shared one story, if you could share that with the audience here, of what you saw on the farm.
Well, so Hamas, it's obvious this was planned for a long, long time, and great training, because they divided their terrorists into teams, and every team had an assignment, and they had everything they needed. They had maps of the buildings they were supposed to go to and where to find things, and assignments of things to accomplish. And so they stuck to the script, so to speak. So we were on one kibbutz where there was a group of terrorists that attacked the gate that day, but there was another group there to shut down the economy of the kibbutz. And on this kibbutz, it's a dairy farm. That's their main business, farming. And they milk 350 cows 3 times a day. So they came in through the back. The group that came to the front gate, the security team engaged them with guns, and they never made it inside. But the team that went to the back got in because that was the back door, not guarded as well. They burnt down a barn. They destroyed all the equipment. They were shooting up everything, and they ended up murdering foreign workers from Thailand and from Nepal. We saw the bunkhouse where they killed them and set on fire. We saw bullet holes in the windows. Um, these teams knew exactly what to do and where to go, and that's one of the reasons they were so effective. And listen, I remember that you remember this too. You got up that Saturday morning on the 7th, and you were hearing about 50, maybe 100 terrorists. Israel believes it was 2,500 to 3,500. And then on top of that, as the day wore on, every day Gazans were crossing over, coming in and looting the villages, and taking advantage of the terrorists being there. So it was just unimaginable day that nobody foresaw coming.
How do they expect that Hamas had such good intelligence on, like, the farm? They knew
Yeah.
exactly where to go.
Well, okay, so one of the key sources to getting such detailed information was Israel's kindness to the Gazans to give them work permits to come and work in Israel. So on that farm, a lot of the workers were from Gaza, and they would come in every day and work and then go back to Gaza in the evening. Because Hamas, part of their strategy in setting this up was Israel went through 2 or 3 years of very little violence with Hamas. And so Israel felt like maybe they were finally coming around and ready to sit down and get serious about peace. And so one of Israel's gestures to say, we're ready to work out a peace arrangement with you, was to issue more work permits. And so a lot of Gazans, when they were there working, were making notes, taking pictures, and giving all that information to Hamas so they could plan their attack. It was such a well-coordinated attack. And listen, Israel, we fell into this in 9/11. When that happened, we look back on it, the intelligence missed things and became overconfident in certain areas. And the same happened in Israel. They put in a multi-billion-dollar fence along the border, had tremendous technology, and they felt like they didn't need as many soldiers on the border. In fact, they even pulled them off the border a ways to protect them from sniper fire and things like that, because they had all this technology that they could monitor what's going on. So the first thing Hamas does is take all that out. They did it with drones that you can buy right on Amazon for $50. And they attached, as I understand it, hand grenades to them. And then they destroyed all of the electronic communication. It went dark. Then they cut the holes in the fence and they began pouring in. And nobody was ready for that. It happened to be a holiday weekend, so the troop level was down at a minimum. But it was also very early in the morning, too, which is whenever an army attacks, it's always, they love to attack just before sunrise and catch everybody unawares. And that was part of their strategy, too. But it is just very moving to see what happened and to hear the stories.
We think about 9/11, and that wasn't a situation, those of us that remember it, where you went from unknowing to full knowledge of what was going on. It took time for us to even understand what we were seeing on our screens. And one of the stories you shared when you first came back was the story of those that were on the road, and they had a decision to make, and they weren't understanding what they were seeing ahead of them. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. On the morning of the 7th, nobody could comprehend what was unfolding. It took a while. So we visited a block of villages there just outside Gaza. We could look into Gaza from where we were. And the head of security there was telling us his story of that day. He got up in the morning at 6 in the morning. He said 6:15, he's in his kitchen fixing a cup of coffee when his phone starts getting all these red alerts and messages. So he says to his wife, I'm going to get in the car and go check this out, and I'll be back later. He drives to the front of the kibbutz, and he sees all these cars parked along the road and in the yard there. And he quickly figures out there's 2 big bomb shelters there at the entrance, of the kibbutz. And all these young people are running into the shelters. So he pulls up there and he starts talking to them. Some of the cars were coming in to go to the music concert. Others had fled the music concert, but they were there because suddenly missiles are raining in, and they're looking for a safe place, a bomb shelter. So he quickly sizes up that from those that had left the concert that something bad was happening there, and he needed to get them all out of there. That was not the place to stay. So he says to him, if you will trust me and follow me, I'll lead you out of here. So they all got in their cars, and he led a train of 42 cars up the road. A couple miles up the road was a major intersection, and when he got about a quarter mile from it, he sees ahead in the intersection is a truck stopped. It's a white pickup truck. And you can see somebody in the back of it with a machine gun and a tripod. And guns mounted on a tripod. And so he stops his car and he's trying to figure out, it doesn't look like IDF, but who would it be if it's not IDF? When a car comes the other way, stops and says to him, don't go down there. They're shooting at cars. And they've already shot at mine. And so the car moves on, and he's sitting there trying to process, is this real? Is this really dangerous? What is happening? Who is that up there? When the guns turned and fired at his car. So he does a 180. And he says to these people in the cars, at this point, I don't have time to explain to you what's happening, but you have to trust me. I'm going to take you through an orchard and field on some farm roads. And if you will trust me and follow me, you will be safe. I will get you out of here. And so 12 of those cars, the people in the cars didn't feel safe doing that. They were concerned their cars weren't high enough to go through the farm fields or that they would be damaged. And so 12 of the cars stayed there. The rest followed him. And he got all of those 30 cars to the municipal building that was about a mile and a half away. And the basement of that municipal building is a bunker. It's a reinforced bunker. And he took them all down there. The mayor was there, and that was their command center for the rest of the day. They ended up spending the whole night there. The next morning, he gets up worried about these 12 cars and what happened to them, and he drives over to where he left them, and they're all there, but everybody inside those cars was dead. They had come along and executed everybody. And because he knew that the IDF would be bringing heavy equipment through, tanks and artillery and things, and that they would need the road cleared, in Jewish culture, you respect the dead. You don't defile the dead, right? So he and another gentleman began removing all those people and laying them in a ditch and covering them up out of respect for them before those cars were pushed out of the way. So that's just an example of the kind of experiences that people were going through that morning. Interesting, he said when he got to the municipal building, went down into the bunker, the mayor's there, but all the mayor understands is there's missiles being fired. He doesn't know anything about the terrorists at that point, and he can't make sense out of what Rafi's telling him until he has, until a while goes on, and they're hearing other reports, and he suddenly gets it, right? It's the most helpless thing because they couldn't go out and easily fight. Because they didn't have the weapons. The IDF, everybody's wondering where's the IDF? Well, it's a holiday weekend. And it took the IDF a while to get online because all the communication's taken out. We heard a story, Steve, from a woman. Her family lived in a kibbutz just north of the northern border of Gaza. In fact, there's a wall at the end of their kibbutz. It was called the Peace Wall that was up against the fence to Gaza. And it had all kinds of symbols and things about peace. Well, that peace was shattered on October 7th. She lives on a street that's circular, and every home on her street was hit by the terrorists and neighbors killed except her home. It's an amazing thing. For some reason, they left her home alone. But, she told the story of the nightmare of that day, of seeing what they were doing to the neighbors and to the community, and not being able to go anywhere, do anything about it, and wondering where they're going to be next. You can just imagine the trauma that you go through. We heard other stories of just difficult things. And yet one of the themes that came through to us was how calmly Jewish people were dealing with this in the midst. We were up at the Magan David Adam's Jerusalem Center. Magan David Adam is the Red Cross of Israel. And they have a facility in Jerusalem that is a call center, takes in the emergency calls and then dispatches ambulances and motorcycles and police if they need to and so forth. So we were there our last day, the morning of our last day. We did a tour. We saw the call center and the amazing system they have. It's just leading edge technology, and it's so efficient. And they know where every ambulance is in Israel. They know which ones are responding to calls and which aren't, and they can find the closest one to answer any call. And one of the gals that took us on the tour, when we were done with the tour, sat us down and told her about her experience on that day. It was a day off, but she got a call at 7 a.m. From her supervisor saying, "We need you in immediately." She has 2 daughters, 9 and 12 years old. And she said, "I can't come unless I can bring my daughters because I have no place else to leave them." And they said, "Bring her." 3 times. She doesn't live that far away, like 5 minutes away, but 3 times on the way to the center, they had to stop their car and get out because of sirens and incoming missiles and lay flat on the ground because there was no bomb shelters nearby. And so when she gets to the center, they tell her they need her at a station to take calls. They were overwhelmed. They went from what's typically maybe 3,000 calls a day to like 45,000 on that day. And so they were overwhelmed with calls. And they didn't even have time to brief her on what was going on because they needed her immediately. And she began relaying some of the conversations that day and calls she took. And for example, of a paramedic in bravery who was at the clinic there treating people who were coming in with injuries, gunshot wounds and things, who kept calling and asking for an ambulance. And they couldn't send an ambulance in because there was fighting outside. There was a war. And she kept encouraging her, telling her she was doing a great job, but that until the fighting was done, they couldn't send an ambulance in. But the gal she was talking to was so calm. She would say, "Okay, I understand." And then call back a while later saying, we need an ambulance, and the same answer. And that young lady, 23-year-old paramedic, there were 2 guys at the door of the clinic with guns and ammunition fighting off the terrorists, but they eventually ran out of ammunition and the terrorists came in and killed everybody. They found this gal's body a couple days later. She still had her gloves on. She was treating people right to the end, and she had a bullet hole in her leg. And she had a tourniquet. So they know she was injured prior to dying, and she put a tourniquet on and continued to treat people until they were overrun. We heard the actual call of a 9-year-old boy who is with his 6-year-old sister hiding in a closet. And that boy was so calm. He had seen his mother and his father gunned down. He knew they were dead. And he also had a younger sister, a 4 or 5-year-old sister, who he thought was dead, that she had been shot too. And they're hiding in a closet. And they call the dispatch center, they call it the call center. And the guy at the other end was so great. He was calming them down. He was telling them, "You're doing a great job. You are the man of the family now, and you need to protect your younger sister." And tells them to cover themselves up with clothes. Lay down on the floor of the closet and cover yourself up with clothes and don't come out, regardless of what anybody says to you. And they were there 12 hours. And when the IDF did show up, they were afraid to come out because they didn't know if they were terrorists. Hamas's attack was so well thought out and planned that many of the initial terrorists that came into these villages were dressed in IDF, looked like IDF soldiers, speaking Hebrew. So despicable. So It's amazing. You know, she described how many calls she had where people were calm in the midst of what they were going through. A woman who called about her husband who had been shot, and she said, "I'll send the ambulance." Oh, no, no, no. There's 5 people hurt worse. He's here with me. Neither one of them survived, you know. So can you imagine the trauma that you have to process? And for her, she hasn't had a chance to do it yet. Why? Because she's still on the front line.
Yeah.
So it, Israel always amazes me with how they run the country, the way they take care of one another. We were able to go and see organizations who are doing all that. They have a brand new blood center. You and I visited it in early August, and now it's in production. And they're actually processing blood there. It's the most sophisticated system probably in the world for doing that and for testing the blood, which is really important. But they have to be able to have an adequate blood supply because of the war going on. And
thank the Lord that was ready to go.
It was. And actually people in Israel responded in such numbers they had to turn some away because they couldn't physically collect all the blood. And blood's only good for a period of time. So they were telling them, come back in a month, we'll need you then. You know, the sense I get of the country, everybody is united. It is the opposite of what you and I witnessed in August. Everybody gets that this is about the survival of Israel and that they cannot afford not to win the war and not to complete the job. So the biggest concern everybody has right now is for what's going on up north with Hezbollah. So Israel evacuated all the villages around Gaza within 5 or 10 kilometers. They evacuated all the people, and they will be able to return if they want to return once the war ends. But and I think, if I remember correctly, in numbers like 10, 15,000, something like that. But up north, they've evacuated 80,000. And so how do you send those people back? They've been over 100 days now away from home. How do you send them back? You cannot send them back if there is a threat that the same thing could happen to them as happened on October 7th. And Israel's highly confident that Hezbollah was planning to do the same thing up north. They were probably just going to hold off a few days until Israel was really committed to Gaza before they did. But Israel did a couple things that changed the game. One is they brought up reserves. They brought up 350,000 reserves, brought their military up to 500,000. So now Hezbollah lost the element of surprise, and they would encounter the IDF. And the second thing they did was they brought everybody within 5 kilometers of the border, they evacuated. So now their primary targets are gone. If Hezbollah had coordinated and done the same day as Hamas, there would have been many more casualties up north than there is down south. But Hezbollah is right on the border with Israel. They could launch an attack at any time. They've been lobbing over missiles and artillery shells and drones and things like that. So the people that have been evacuated, 80,000 who are desperate to go back home, can't go back home unless Hezbollah is removed from the border, has to be pushed back. And that's when you hear about negotiations going on right now with Hezbollah, and the U.S. is trying to broker that. That's what it's about. It's about getting Hezbollah to give up territory. In 2006, there was a UN resolution that brought an end to the conflict in Lebanon that called for Hezbollah to pull back to the Litani River, which is about 20 miles north of the border, and to remain there. But before the ink was dry in the resolution, Hezbollah was already pulling across the river and coming back into that territory. So they're well embedded there. And just the sentiment in Israel is we can't see any way they would give that up without a war. So everybody pretty much has a sense that Israel's probably going to have a war with Hezbollah too, and it will be a harder war. It'll be much more difficult than the war they have with Gaza. But there is a unity that we need to deal with this, and we need to deal with this now, so future generations aren't at risk like we are.
So that brings me to a final question. We know that the Israeli people, they're feeling emotional trauma, obviously, but they have on their doorstep the potential for an even greater escalation of the war in the north. How should we be praying? You talked about blessing Israel. How can we actively bless Israel right now as Christians?
It's a great question, Steve. And, in Israel, while there's a concern for what's coming, there's a tremendous resilience. You pick up on, like, in spite of everything they're going through, they're not going anywhere. They're there to stay, kind of a mentality. But I think, in the Old Testament, Psalms 122:6, the only thing God commands us to pray for is the peace of Jerusalem. So certainly praying for peace is biblical. We know lasting peace won't come till Messiah comes. But I think we need to be praying for the leadership of Israel. They have really challenging decisions to make. And their choices will impact so many people. The hostages and their families, the hostages have been held now for almost 4 months. And we need to be praying that God will send them back quickly. For those that are in the IDF fighting, that are in the front line, they have an amazing commitment to stay and finish the job, even though they'd rather be home with family members. Most of the ones fighting the war are reservists. And they have families at home, and they have jobs they've left, and it's not easy. We should be praying for the families of those fighting. It's difficult not knowing where your loved one is, what the situation is. Are they safe? Are they in danger? And of course, nobody wants the visit to say that they've given their life in service. I think we need to be praying that that God will open up hearts and minds to the truth of the gospel. We know from our workers that people are more open to talking about spiritual matters and what the future holds, and we really covet those opportunities. We really want to be not just a physical comfort, but also a spiritual comfort to the Jewish people.
And we've seen our donor base increase at the end of this year. People are activated, and I think we can add that prayer that more Christians would not just be activated, but stay motivated, that we wouldn't lose sight of what's happening.
Don't tire from all the news, because Israel's still at war and under threat. And we know that God blesses Israel. We know that God will not allow Israel to be wiped out. There's that promise in Jeremiah 31. But it doesn't mean Israel won't have difficult days ahead. And, this week was a difficult one when 21 soldiers were killed in the collapse of a couple buildings. Those are tough days.
Well, there are many more stories. Just thank you for taking the time to share the ones that you were able to share with our audience today. And just pray that this would be meaningful in our audience's lives to continue to pray and support Israel.
Thank you, Steve. I wish we could talk about more enlightening things and positive things, but this is the reality of what is happening in Israel, and I appreciate the opportunity to come and share that with you.
We talked about important ways we can pray together for the people of Israel during this time. If you have not already, you can subscribe to the Friends of Israel's YouTube channel and stay current on what's happening in our ministry. Our workers in Israel and around the globe are not able to do the work of standing with Israel and bringing hope to the Jewish people without you. Please do not cease praying for them. Israel and the Jewish people continue to need our help. If you want to stand with us as we stand with Israel with a financial contribution, visit foi.org/standwithisrael.